What if I told you that there is a form of healing that doesn't begin in the body, but in vibration? A force so subtle, so overlooked, that modern medicine often misses it entirely, yet powerful enough to transform pain, restore balance, and awaken something deep within you. This isn't fantasy. This is the forgotten intersection between spirit, mind, and energy, and it's something Edgar Cayce spoke about decades ago. Cayce, often called the sleeping prophet, described the human body not as a machine made only of flesh and chemicals, but as a living field of energy, vibrating, responsive, and deeply connected to something greater. According to his readings, illness doesn't always begin in the physical body. It begins when harmony is disrupted, when thoughts, emotions, and spiritual alignment fall out of sync. The body eventually follows. Now consider this: if imbalance creates illness, then restoring harmony can create healing. And this is where the idea of Christ vibration enters the conversation. Cayce spoke of Christ not only as a historical figure, but as a living frequency, a pattern of perfect alignment between love, purpose, and divine connection. He described it as the highest vibration available to human consciousness. Not something reserved for saints or mystics, but something accessible, if one learns how to attune to it. So what does that actually mean? Think of your body like an instrument. When it's in tune, it produces clarity, strength, and resilience. But when it's out of tune, even slightly, the sound becomes distorted. Cayce believed the same principle applies to your inner life. Your thoughts, your emotions, your beliefs, these are not passive. They are active vibrations that shape your physical condition. Negative patterns, fear, resentment, chronic stress, lower the body's vibrational state. Over time, this can manifest as tension, fatigue, even disease. But higher states, compassion, forgiveness, faith elevate the system. They restore coherence. They create conditions where healing becomes possible. And this is where the teachings become both simple and challenging. Because raising your vibration isn't about pretending everything is fine. It's not about denying pain or forcing positivity. It's about alignment. It's about gradually bringing your inner world into harmony with something deeper, something Cayce described as the Spirit of Christ within. He emphasized that this alignment could be practiced daily, through stillness, through prayer, through meditation, through intentional thought. Each moment becomes an opportunity to choose a higher pattern instead of a lower one. But here's the part that most people miss. Cayce didn't suggest abandoning medicine. He didn't reject the physical world. Instead, he proposed that true healing often requires both approaches, the physical and the vibrational, working together. Medicine can treat symptoms, support the body, stabilize conditions. But vibration addresses the root. And when the root shifts, something remarkable happens. The body begins to respond differently. Stress lessens. Systems regulate. The nervous system calms. What once felt stuck begins to move. Not instantly, not magically, but steadily. There are documented accounts from Cayce's readings where individuals experienced improvement, not just from remedies or treatments, but from changing their inner state, from cultivating faith, from practicing forgiveness, from aligning their thoughts with a higher purpose. And whether you interpret that spiritually, psychologically, or energetically, the pattern is hard to ignore. The question becomes, what are you tuning yourself to? Every day, your attention locks onto something: worry, pressure, fear, or intention, presence, meaning. These choices may seem small, but over time, they shape your internal frequency. And your internal frequency shapes your experience. So imagine, just for a moment, what would happen if you deliberately chose alignment? If you treated your thoughts not as random noise, but as signals. If you approached your inner life the same way a musician approaches tuning carefully, consistently, with awareness. Because according to Cayce, healing isn't something you chase. It's something you allow by restoring the conditions where it can occur. And those conditions begin within you. Now here's where it gets even more interesting, because Edgar Cayce didn't just talk about vibration in a philosophical sense. He gave very practical guidance on how to raise it and how to actually live in alignment with what he called the Christ consciousness. He often emphasized that the body, mind, and spirit are not separate systems. They are one interconnected process. When one is out of balance, the others compensate. But when all three are aligned, something powerful happens, a kind of internal coherence that allows energy to flow without resistance. Cayce described this flow almost like an electrical current. When the pathways are clear, the current moves freely, energizing every part of the system. But when there's blockage, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual, the flow becomes restricted. Over time, that restriction can show up as discomfort, dysfunction, or disease. So the question becomes, what creates these blockages? According to Cayce, one of the biggest factors is emotional buildup, unresolved anger, lingering guilt, deep-seated fear. These aren't just psychological experiences. They imprint themselves into the body. They create tension patterns, disrupt circulation, and interfere with the natural rhythms of the nervous system. And here's something he stressed repeatedly. Holding on to these states is like keeping the body in a constant state of resistance. Now imagine trying to heal while resistance is present. It's like trying to push water through a clogged pipe. No matter how much pressure you apply, the flow is limited. This is why Cayce placed so much importance on forgiveness, not as a moral obligation, but as a functional tool for healing. Letting go isn't about excusing what happened. It's about releasing the energetic grip it has on you. When that grip loosens, something shifts. The body relaxes. The breath deepens. The nervous system begins to reset. And this is where the concept of Christ vibration becomes very real. Because at its core, Cayce described this vibration as unconditional love, not just as an idea, but as a state of being, a frequency that dissolves resistance, restores harmony, and reconnects the individual with a greater source of life. He suggested that when a person genuinely embodies this state, even in small moments, the effects ripple through the entire system. Think about a time when you felt truly at peace, not distracted, not tense, but fully present and calm. In those moments, your body likely felt lighter. Your breathing slowed. Your mind became clearer. That's not coincidence. That's coherence. And Cayce believed that cultivating this state regularly could have measurable effects on health. He recommended simple, consistent practices. Sitting in silence each day. Reflecting on qualities like patience, kindness, and compassion. Not just thinking about them, but feeling them. Letting them become part of your internal environment. Because again, this isn't about external performance. It's about internal alignment. He also spoke about the power of intention. The idea that what you hold in your mind, especially with emotion behind it, acts like a tuning signal. It directs your energy. It shapes your response to life. If your intention is scattered or negative, your energy follows that pattern. But if your intention is clear, grounded, and aligned with something higher, your entire system begins to organize around it. And this is where many people underestimate their own role in healing. They look outward for solutions, waiting for something to fix them. But Cayce's perspective was different. He believed that while external support is important, the internal state is what determines how effective that support will be. In other words, two people can receive the same treatment and have completely different outcomes. Why? Because their internal environments are different. One may be open, receptive, and aligned. The other may be tense, resistant, and disconnected. And over time, those differences matter. This doesn't mean you're to blame for illness. That's not the message. The message is that you have influence more than you might realize. And that influence begins with awareness. Becoming aware of your thoughts, your emotional patterns, your reactions. Not judging them, not suppressing them, but observing them. Because once you see the pattern, you can begin to change it. And change, even in small increments, creates movement. Movement creates flow. And flow is where healing begins to take shape. But there's another layer to this that Edgar Cayce spoke about, something deeper than thoughts and emotions alone. He believed that each person carries an inner blueprint, a kind of spiritual pattern that reflects their highest potential. And when your daily life begins to match that inner pattern, your energy changes. Cayce often referred to this as living in attunement. Not perfection, not constant bliss, but a steady effort to align your actions, your choices, and your mindset with something higher than impulse or habit. Because here's the truth most people don't consider. You can think positive thoughts all day long, but if your actions contradict them, the signal becomes mixed. The body doesn't just respond to what you say internally, it responds to what you consistently do. This is why Cayce emphasized purpose. He believed that having a clear sense of purpose, even a simple one, creates direction for your energy. It organizes your life. It reduces internal conflict. And that alone can relieve a surprising amount of stress on the system. Think about it. When you feel lost or uncertain, your mind tends to scatter. You second-guess yourself. You hesitate. That hesitation creates tension. But when your actions are guided by a clear intention, even challenges feel different. There's less resistance, more flow. And according to Cayce, that state of flow is closely tied to healing. He encouraged people to ask themselves a simple question: how can I be of service? Not in a grand, overwhelming way, but in small daily actions. Helping someone, listening more deeply, acting with honesty. These choices may seem minor, but they create alignment between your inner values and your outer behavior. And that alignment raises your vibration. Now here's where things become even more profound. Cayce suggested that the body has its own intelligence, a built-in ability to repair, regulate, and restore itself. But this intelligence functions best when it's not being constantly interrupted by stress, conflict, or negative patterns. When you're in a state of alignment mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, you're essentially giving the body permission to do what it was designed to do. Heal. Not instantly, not perfectly, but naturally. He also spoke about the importance of rhythm, regular sleep, balanced nutrition, time for reflection. These aren't just lifestyle tips, they're part of maintaining vibrational stability. When your life is chaotic, your system becomes reactive. When your life has rhythm, your system becomes responsive. And there's a big difference between the two. A reactive system is always on edge. It's constantly adjusting, constantly compensating. That takes energy. And over time, it wears the body down. A responsive system, on the other hand, is steady. It adapts without strain. It recovers more quickly. It maintains balance even when external conditions change. Cayce believed that cultivating this kind of stability was essential not just for physical health, but for overall well-being. And again, this ties back to the idea of Christ vibration. Because if you strip away all the terminology, what he's really pointing to is a state of harmony. A way of living where your thoughts, your actions, and your deeper values are not in conflict. Where you're not constantly pulling yourself in different directions. Where your energy isn't scattered, but focused. And when that happens, something subtle but powerful begins to shift. You start to feel more grounded, more clear, more present. Decisions become easier. Reactions become calmer. the noise begins to quiet. And in that quiet, the body has space. Space to regulate, space to repair, space to restore. This is why stillness plays such a key role in Cayce's teachings. Not just physical stillness, but mental stillness. Taking time each day to step away from stimulation, to sit, to breathe, to listen. Because in those moments, you're not just relaxing, you're recalibrating. You're giving your system a chance to return to its natural state of balance. And the more consistently you do this, the more familiar that state becomes. Until eventually, it's not something you visit occasionally. It's something you begin to live from. And this brings us to the most important realization of all: healing is not something outside of you that you have to chase. It's something that begins within you through alignment, awareness, and the choices you make, moment by moment. Edgar Cayce's message wasn't complicated, but it was deeply challenging, because it places responsibility back into your hands. Not blame, but responsibility. The ability to influence your state, to participate in your own healing process. He believed that every individual has access to this higher vibration, not through perfection, but through intention and consistency. And that's where most people struggle. Not because the practices are difficult, but because they require presence. They require you to slow down, to become aware of patterns that usually run in the background, to make small adjustments over and over again, even when no one is watching. But here's what's important to understand. You don't have to change everything at once. In fact, trying to do that often creates more stress, more resistance, more imbalance. Instead, Cayce encouraged gradual alignment. One thought at a time, one action at a time, one moment of awareness at a time, because each of those moments sends a signal that begins to shift your internal environment. And over time, those signals add up. They create momentum. They create change. Now imagine what happens when that change becomes consistent. When your thoughts begin to support your well-being instead of working against it. When your emotions become more stable, more grounded. When your actions reflect your values instead of contradicting them. At that point, you're no longer fighting your own system. You're working with it. And that's when healing becomes more than just a possibility. It becomes a natural outcome. Cayce also spoke about faith, but not in a passive sense. Not blind belief. He described faith as a kind of knowing, a trust that the process is working, even when you can't immediately see the results. Because one of the biggest obstacles to healing is impatience. People want immediate change, immediate relief, immediate proof. But the body doesn't always work that way. It responds over time. It adapts gradually. It rebuilds in layers. And if you interrupt that process with doubt, frustration, or constant second-guessing, you create interference. So part of this journey is learning to trust the process, to stay consistent even when progress feels slow, to recognize that small improvements are still movement in the right direction, and to understand that true healing isn't just about removing symptoms, it's about creating a state where those symptoms are less likely to return. Because the foundation has changed. And this is where everything comes full circle. The idea of Christ vibration, the concept of alignment, the focus on thought, emotion, and action. It all points to the same core principle: harmony. When you are in harmony within yourself, your system functions differently. You think differently. You feel differently. You respond to life differently. And over time, your body reflects that change. So the real question isn't whether this kind of healing is possible. The real question is, are you willing to begin? Not perfectly, not all at once, but right now, with a single moment of awareness, a single conscious breath, a single choice to move toward alignment instead of away from it. Because that's where it starts. And the more you return to that space, the more natural it becomes. Until one day, without forcing it, without chasing it, you realize something has shifted, not just in your body, but in the way you experience life itself.